Okay. You know what I really want to talk about? I
Yeah.
want to talk about you breaking in Florida with Eddie Mansfield. I mean, that
Okay.
that that name is just it's polarizing in the industry. A lot of people, I'm sure, watching this have no idea who that even is. So, do you want to give a little background of why his name is so significant, and just tell me a little bit about the man? I know nothing about him other than what I've read online.
Yeah. Eddie Mansfield was a professional wrestler in the 70s and early 80s and wrestled in a lot of different territories. He wrestled for the Sheik in Detroit. He wrestled in Tennessee. He wrestled in Florida. He was championship wrestling for Florida. He was Pensacola for the Fullers, and also was on championship wrestling from Georgia championship wrestling. And in the, I guess it was 84, 85, it was a big expose on the wrestling business. And Eddie Mansfield exposed the wrestling business. And then, of course, went away. He had already been blackballed. It was a whole, I don't understand. I never got the whole story. But anyway, so now fast forward 7 years or so to 1990, 1991. And I had just graduated college and was working at a radio station, lucked into an opportunity with a local promoter to do ring announcing. He wrestled. He got me an audition for a startup television company. And he said, it's with Eddie Mansfield. And I remembered that name. And I was like, okay. He exposed a business that I didn't work in. So I had no reason to be mad at him. And I went up and met him. I knew who he was instantly. He was very nice to me. And I did one interview with the guy that I went up with, Cliff Anderson, God rest his soul. I interviewed him and I got the job. So he was starting up a promotion called the IWF, and it was going to be based out of Universal Studios, Florida, and it was. And originally I was going to be just the ringside interview guy, the Mean Gene Okerlund, the whatever. And then the day of the first taping, he said, you're going to actually be doing play-by-play, because they had Charlie Platt, who used to be the Gulf Coast TV announcer. He couldn't make it. So I did it. And did the job for as long as the promotion was in existence, which was about 2 or 3 years. And we always had fun. And I worked with Eddie. Worked very closely with him. He was great. We never really talked too much about the hows and whys of what he did. But he was feeling a lot of pressure from within the industry. I think top down, as the industry was expanding nationally, Vince taking over, spots were getting harder and harder to come by. He was not the biggest guy in the world, but he had something special. And he was, if you watch his stuff, he was very good in the ring. The worst part about Eddie was Eddie. He got heat with a lot of people within the industry because he was very bold with his ideas, and he thought he was good and he had no problem telling anybody, and promoters don't like that. So he gave me one example. He was in Georgia. Ole was the booker. And he's got all kinds of heat with Ole, of course, who puts up with no nonsense. Ole tells him he's got a squash match on TV, 4 or 5 minutes long, and all I want you to do, Eddie, is work the guy's arm. And Eddie thinks, well, how am I supposed to get over working the guy's arm? So we lock up. I smash the guy's arm. I immediately throw him out of the ring, Eddie says. I start running his arm into the ring post. I take the arm over to Gordon's desk. I smash it on the desk. I smash it on the apron. I tie it in the ropes. I'm almost getting disqualified. We're beating this guy's arm to death, finally puts the arm bar in and gets the submission win. He comes back through the curtain and Ole's there screaming at him. What the hell was that? You told me to work his arm. Yeah, but it was supposed to be with wrestling. Well, that's what I do. This is what I do. And wound up having the big falling out. And then that led to, and he was also involved with, and I'll tell this story. This is neat. Not neat, but interesting. His wife at the time was the sister of the woman who was killed by Jimmy Snuka.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And so Louise Argento was on the, and of course, you know, now Jimmy's passed, and I guess there's been a court verdict of some kind that he was eventually found guilty, or it was a civil trial. I'm not sure what it was. He never faced criminal charges, but the deceased woman did finally get some justice, from what I understand. And so that story was heavy. And so I always heard it from her point of view, from the family's point of view, that, you know, what Jimmy had done, et cetera, et cetera. And then what was reported was not really the whole story. It was covered up, Vince, money, influence, et cetera. So it was always, you know, it's that 6 degrees of separation. And then when I went and did an interview with Jimmy for Confidential, when I did that show for WWF, and it didn't make air, you know, the interview did, and he came clean about being on drugs and doing all sorts of bad things, but wanted to really atone for that. And I asked him, I said, what about Linda Argento? And he said, what? I said, what about Linda Argento? Do you have any memories of that? That's in that situation? And he says, oh, sorry, brother. I don't know who he is. Okay, moving on. So, yeah. So Eddie Mansfield he was a great boss. He didn't have any money, but somehow cobbled together a TV show and put it on the air, and it was on like Sunshine Network, and, you know, which used to be the regional sports network in Florida. And it was on, you know, a few different spots, but it was shot at Universal. 600 million, it valued at $600 million. It was at the time, $600 million backdrop for our wrestling TV show. We had some good talent. We had Blackjack Mulligan and the team that became the Smoking Guns and Rob Van Dam. There was a whole host of real good Florida guys that were on there. Nasty Ned Brady, who had done a lot of extra work with WCW throughout the years. And it was a great, great learning experience. The tape that I put together in like 1993 and sent to the WWF office, never hearing back from them, figuring it got thrown out, eventually got me my job 3 years later in 96 when they hired me.
Kevin, you talked about Eddie. There's only a few spots left over. His time in the business was over. Talk about spots. Becoming an announcer, you become a wrestler. Every time I told someone I want to be a wrestler, I get the side-eye look. But there's 50 guys on a roster. There's 20 guys on an indie show. An announcer, there's what, 4 in a promotion? There's 1 on a show. Like, did you think you were going to be able to make a living doing this?
I didn't think I could not make a living. I was so ignorant to it that I never quantified the odds against it. But when you step back and you think about it, yeah, it was ridiculous. And I got the side-eye look when I was in college. I went to Florida State, and I'm in the, you know, I'm working on the radio station. I'm doing the sports reports. I'm involved with the athletic department, covering the team for Seminole Uprising. And it's like, well, what do you want to do when you graduate next year? You know, ESPN. I actually want to get into wrestling. Huh? Oh, you know, that's never going to happen. Yeah, ESPN, sure. But no, I always wanted to get into wrestling since I was 9. Ace, I wanted to. I didn't want to be the wrestler. I wanted to be Gordon Soley. I grew up in Florida, so I moved from New York to Florida when I was 9, and that's when I started watching wrestling. That's who I wanted to be, and that was what I was always going to be. I just didn't know how. And when I started working at the radio station, I was there, I don't know, 6 weeks. After I had graduated, I got a job at the local AM station, and the phone rang, and it was a local promoter. It was the guy, Cliff Anderson. And the woman that answered the call, she was like, do you know anybody who wants to ring announce a wrestling show? I said, give me that phone. Yes. Hello. I'm the guy. And yeah, Cliff was great to me. Was the first person to hire me and got me my audition with Eddie. And, you know, the rest, as they say, is history. It was June 14th, 1991 was the day of my first television show.
Nice.